Welcome back to the Aesthetic Edit podcast. My name is Mary Robb, and my co-host Savannah is out today. She is preparing for her wedding that's coming up in a very quick 2 weeks. Today, I'm so excited to introduce a very special guest. He is someone that I met 3 years ago at his company launch party. I was absolutely blown away just by the vision that he had, his emphasis on social responsibility in the aesthetic space. And I knew from the moment that we met that we absolutely had to do business together. He has a production company and has a really great social media presence. And now we actually manage his profile on social media as well, which just feels like a dream come true for me. So I'm so excited to have Marco Emilio Valle here with us today, the founder of Aesthetic Influencers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mary.
Can you tell our audience just a little bit more about who you are, your background, and how you started with Aesthetic Influencers?
So I've been in the space now for almost 15 years, the medical aesthetic space. I started with Allergan back in 2010, and it was an amazing experience I'm so grateful for. Went to the tech space for about 1.5 years, which was also amazing in a marketing role for some large enterprise integrators, which taught me a bunch of really great, cool principles that I've made a part of my whole life and profession. Like, for instance, the spirit of iteration, right? That perfection is not the goal because perfection is not attainable, but meaningful progress is. And then I was recruited by Galderma back in 2014 when they launched their aesthetic business unit. I ended up becoming the US sales training manager there and worked on all the brand advisory boards for Sculptra, Dysport, Restylane. And have since moved on from there to be a sales director at a couple of corporate med spas, including Orange Twist. And 3 years ago, when you and I met, I had made the decision to launch my own company, Aesthetic Influencers, because first and foremost, I wanted to leave an enduring legacy for my own kids to think about aesthetics in their own lives and to have a balanced, harmonized approach to be able to appreciate beauty and medical aesthetics, but also to not lose their identity in it, which that whole mindset and approach around social responsibility and finding meaning and higher purpose in what we do in medical aesthetics has really been the foundation for my success going all the way back to when I first started in 2010 with Allergan. And that's how I've trained and not only sales reps and sales managers, but also coached practices and providers as well. So I began Aesthetic Influencers, which has now grown to become an amazing company where we provide sales coaching, brand consulting, and as you mentioned, creative content and production services for both manufacturers as well as providers in the space who also share our vision and values around higher purpose and social responsibility. So we've been able to, I've been privileged to serve clients like MERS and Cynosure, Cartessa, among others, and also on the provider side, Skin Spirit, and a number of other just great companies, providers and practices. And this summer, we will be launching our third service line, Aesthetic Sales Hero, which will be a cloud-based sales coaching platform and ecosystem for practices and providers.
We cannot wait for that. I think that's one of the things that I was so impressed by when we first connected is just you have so much experience in aesthetics, but what makes you unique is that you truly have more of a purpose in this work that we're doing. It's not just about the industry and the technology and the procedures, but you really see this from a much bigger picture. And part of me wants to think that that might have to do with the prayer hikes that you go on. A lot of the conversations that Marco and I have about his business and the ideas you have and even strategy for social content is during those prayer hikes. So can you tell our audience a little bit more about what a prayer hike is and how it really influences the way that you go about doing business?
Yeah, sure. So it started when I was in college. They used to be prayer runs.
Oh my gosh. You would pray and run at the same time.
Yeah. So I've always been privileged, and I count it as a huge privilege, to have lived in close proximity to some kind of wilderness or green space. And I've always taken advantage of that. And initially, it would be going on runs as a way to commune with God and also to clear my mind. I learned years ago the importance of just being, embracing the quiet, as I call it, right? We have so much noise and information coming at us from every direction nowadays. So just to be able to quiet one's mind, and especially if you can do it in the context of, being among the trees and the birds, it's really ideal. And so on a regular basis, I will put on a rucksack, so a weighted backpack. So there's a little work involved as well, and get some cardio and strength training in. And I will go on these prayer hikes in this wilderness space that's just about all of 30 seconds away from my front door.
Wow.
And it's just I actually view it as really my secret weapon for life, because there are so many stressors. Yeah, I'm a single father. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a lot of responsibilities and accountabilities on my shoulders. And so this is a way for me to renew and refresh and regenerate myself. And my best business ideas come to me on these prayer hikes, as well as a lot of just profound insight and peace.
Yeah. I kind of assumed that the prayer hike had something to do with the creation of aesthetic influencers and now this new business model. I also the energy that you have is very calming and clear and focused. And so you talking about the value of taking that time, I think is so important, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs, our audience can probably relate. You're ambitious and you have a lot of energy and you want to just do all the things. We get stuck in shiny object syndrome sometimes, but taking that time is so important. So how did the idea for aesthetic influencers come to you?
That's such an important question. I've been in, as I said, medical aesthetics now for almost 15 years. And I did not ever imagine that I would be in medical aesthetics. My formal training is actually in psychology and divinity. So I have a BA in psychology and I have a Master of Divinity. So my formal training is in psychoanalysis and pastoral counseling. But in 2010, I found myself at the end of my rope as a struggling newlywed. My wife at the time and my son almost died in labor and delivery.
Oh, wow.
And they were still suffering complications from that, which was a tremendous amount of strain on us and financially. And then the nonprofit that I was a part of went completely sideways. And so I was really financially desperate. In fact, it was so bad, I was literally paying my first mortgage with my second.
Wow.
Which is that's not like a Dave Ramsey.
We know about him.
Yeah, that's not Dave Ramsey and Susie Ormond would not approve of that. But I mean, that's how desperate I was. And so
wow.
I saw a LinkedIn or an Indeed job opening for an Allergan business development manager. And I won't go into all the details around how I ended up getting that job. And they were incredibly gracious because I didn't have a background in pharmaceutical sales or aesthetic medicine.
Yeah.
But they did put me through the paces. Like, it was literally a 3-month interview process and 10 interviews.
Wow.
And so I got into the space not without as I mentioned, an aesthetic or device or pharmaceutical sales background. And initially, for the first few weeks, I struggled around, is this the right thing? Am I actually helping people? Or am I just doing this because I'm desperate for money? Which I was. I was desperate for money. I needed to take care of my wife and son. But I realized almost immediately after those first initial weeks of, have I done the right thing? That the answer to finding meaning in what I was doing was literally in the faces of my patients and the providers that I was serving, the joy, the happiness, the tears, the hugs, right? That contrary to what I had assumed about this space prior to getting into it, that everything is about vanity and it's just vapid and shallow, that actually we do incredibly meaningful work that helps women and men alike with their confidence and their presence and their self-perception and how they interface with others and how others interface with them. And that really drove my success in this space, this mindset of we are truly making a difference in people's lives. And so in pursuit of that meaningfulness, the money followed and so did the success. But I always wanted to make sure that I could explicitly leave a legacy for my kids around what it is that dad does and help them understand my own philosophy around harmonizing their own inner and outer beauty and being able to appreciate aesthetics and what we do, but not losing their identity in it. And so, long answer to a quick question, I started Aesthetic Influencers because this is my opportunity to create and leave that legacy for my kids. I've been privileged to do sales and marketing and training and management and operations roles and consulting for a number of big manufacturers and providers in the space. But this is my opportunity to get my heartbeat out there, again, primarily for my kids. I have my daughter Bianca is 12, my son Marco is 15. And I want to give them something that is lasting and meaningful, where as they grow older, they can appreciate looking and feeling their best, but also understand that true beauty radiates from inner character and living a fulfilled life and seeking to serve and help others, right? In other words, to leave the world a better place than you found it.
I love that.
To learn more about the Aesthetic Edit podcast, follow us on social media at the Aesthetic Edit podcast. We can be found on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
We'd love to hear from you if you have show ideas or guest recommendations for our future podcast episodes. Yeah, I love to hear the background on just the vision that you had. And I think that you've had a lot of intentionality around the work that you're doing, but there's also an element of surrender in that you just almost happened to stumble into the aesthetics industry, but you have so much purpose behind the work that you're doing. So with that experience in mind, is that kind of what led you to having more of an emphasis and focus on social responsibility?
Very much so. It's almost a maxim that we say that, for example, nurses struggle with sales in aesthetic medicine. But what I find, so everyone agrees that, oh yeah, our nurses need to improve in their sales and what have you. And, the majority of my success along with marketing and operations has been sales focused. I was the US sales training manager for Galderma for years. I've done sales training and coaching for both manufacturers and providers and practices for years as well. And so I appreciate the value of processes and practical tips and scripts and scenarios and role playing just as much as the next guy. And I emphasize the importance of that. However, what I find really has driven my own success and the success in those I've been able to coach is moving from a deeper place of higher purpose and owning the responsibility and accountability that we have around social responsibility as providers, as manufacturers, as influencers in this space, because in a very real way, we can help or hurt the aesthetic patients that are coming to us. Are we boosting their confidence? Are we helping them become more secure and have a deeper sense of their own self-worth and value? Or are we falling prey to a profit motive and creating a lifelong patient who now is suffering perception shift, which is a phrase that I love, coined by Sabrina Fabi, around patients who their perception has shifted so far from who they were at baseline, they no longer have a sense of self, right? They've lost that. And so it's important to me to help, again, amplify the voices and increase the influence of those providers and manufacturers that take this responsibility seriously.
Yeah, I love that you have that perspective. And I think it's so interesting. And it just really puts purpose behind the work that we're doing in the aesthetics industry. For providers that are listening, what tips do you have for them? How can they find that in the work they're doing and in their day-to-day, that idea of this social responsibility? Because we'll get into sales in just a little bit, but I think it's nice to start here because we need to start with that foundational, the why, right? So how would you suggest they go about figuring that out for themselves personally?
Well, you segued right into the answer, Mary, which is getting in touch with their own why. And it's not a coincidence that Simon Sinek, who really started this conversation about what is your why, has just completely blown up. He's really considered the thought leader in this. And now all of us, 15 years ago, no one was talking about this, right? Now in 2024, anyone who's a leader of people or a manager or wants to truly have an impact on other people's business starts with, hey, what is your why? Let's get in touch with this. And so that's exactly where I would start, which is you need to be very clear on what are your vision, mission, and values personally and for your practice. What is the legacy that you want to leave on the world? In what ways do you want to make the world a better place? And so, so Simon Sinek wrote Start With Why. Another great author, Stephen Covey, wrote the classic 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. And one of his core habits is begin with the end in mind, right? So very similar around, okay, what is meaningful and valuable to me? And what is that legacy that I want to leave behind? The clearer you are on that, and which is not to say that you can't continue to refine it, right? Seasons in life might change, your priorities might grow, and so you can refine that. But the clearer you are on your own vision, mission, and values, the better foundation, the more solid foundation you're setting up for your own success. And I would say this too, that when you think about the typical nurse injector in particular, or nurse or mid-level, or even physician, right, owner in this space, most of them are not only women who are natural nurturers, I would argue, they're natural nurturers, but also they typically did not initially get into aesthetics when you're talking about medicine, right? They got into the medical field primarily because there was something in them, in their core, that was naturally nurturing, caring, giving, compassionate, right? They're healers at their core. And so the more in touch they can get with that, and the more clear they can get about how does my business plan and how do my business goals flow from that, the more they're going to set themselves up for success.
To connect with today's guest and be the first to access his new sales course, follow Marco at aestheticinfluencers.media on Instagram. Okay, let's jump into the hot take section of this episode.
All right.
We were just talking about how important it is to have clarity on the vision and your why in the work that you're doing. But there's this big misconception that nurses and providers, medical providers, aren't good at sales. What's your hot take on that?
Well, I'm glad you called it a misconception, because I think that by and large, we take it for granted that nurses, clinicians, providers, let's just use that word as a blanket term, are terrible at sales. And my hot take on that is that actually they are exceptional at sales, so long as by and large, they don't really see it as selling, right? So I cannot tell you, and what I mean, let me give you an illustration of what I mean by that. I have quite literally had, maybe at this point, over 100 conversations with individual providers or their teams where by and large, they will tell me something to the effect of, Marco, we love the way you sell. We wish we could put you in the front pocket of our little fig scrubs and bring you into every, prospective consultation or phone call or answer our DMs. And we love aesthetics and we love our patients. We just hate to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always, tongue firmly in cheek, responded with, "You hate to sell? Oh, thank God."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if by sell, you mean manipulate and coerce and push people into doing things that are not in their best interest, that aren't really going to give them the results that they need or help them achieve the goals that they want, then by all means, please don't sell,
Mm-hmm.
right? But can you educate? Can you empower? Can you engage your prospects and patients on your earnest recommendations on their behalf, right? Instead of coercing them, can you move in an authentic place of conviction around, here's what I really believe will give you the confidence you're looking for, the results that you want and need based on my expertise, experience, and skill set, right? So if you really want to distill it down, the secret to my success and with those whom I've coached over all these years, and what really is the framework, if you will, of our upcoming Aesthetic Sales Hero sales coaching platform, is reframing selling as empowering, right? We're not selling, we are empowering the patient. And if my ultimate vision and goal is to empower you as much as possible and in an ongoing way through every stage and phase of your life, then I'm going to keep you engaged. I'm going to educate you. I'm going to, move forward with conviction rather than coercion. And and once you get that, guess what happens? The sales follow.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think I have so many things that I want to dive into on this topic because, whether it's a practice owner or their team struggling with this, there's just so much anxiety around this idea of, I want to help and serve this patient, but then I also know that, I need to present to them this plan and I need to present this pricing. And I can empathize with that in my own experience. Whenever I was 25, I had my first medical sales job and there was so much anxiety that first year. But the reality is I was so passionate and so convicted in the work that I was selling that it was so easy for me. Once I got past that mental block and past that anxiety, I was able to really add value to my clients' lives. And as soon as I got past that, things took off and I became the number one sales rep at my company. So do you have any tips in your experience being, in sales for so long and coaching these providers to be the best that they possibly can be? Do you have any advice on how they can get past any sort of anxiety or those mental blocks holding them back so that when they're with patients, they're present with them and they're able to communicate clearly and not have that anxious energy?
You must reframe selling as empowering. You must see your goal in every prospective or patient interaction. And when I say prospect or prospective, I mean, those DMs or the phone calls, someone that's not yet your patient that you're looking to convert into being one of your patients. And then likewise, your current patient, someone who may be coming to you for one particular treatment area, maybe it's lips or wrinkle relaxation or what have you, but who has not yet partaken in the other services and modalities that you offer. You have to see yourself as their advocate, their guide, their trusted expert, whose overarching goal is to empower them. That will then drive all of your behaviors from a position of moral authority, starting with yourself. You'll have a clear conscience.
Yeah.
Right? You'll feel a sense of urgency that you have to make sure that they know what you can offer them and that it's in their best interest. And then, ironically enough, the more you seek to empower and engage and educate your patients, the more you'll discover that you're actually executing core sales activities. Right?
Yeah.
So do the right thing and the sales will practically take care of themselves.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And I think too, I'd be curious your thoughts on this. Sometimes it's easy to get stuck in your own head around making sure you do all the right things and you execute flawlessly. But what do you think about also the providers really just putting themselves in their patient's shoes and getting into their head? And it's not so much about you, it's about them. And you have these gifts and these talents and the work that you're doing, you are there for a reason. You're meant to be helping and serving these people. So do you have any thought on mindset to kind of shift that perspective?
Mary, I'm so glad you brought that up, because the answer to that is for providers to go back to the core of who they are, right? In every patient interaction or every interaction with a prospective patient, go back to your core as a nurturing, caring, compassionate healer, right? And then as you take a moment to visualize that and remember who you are internally, you're going to be growing in your empathy toward that person. You're going to remember and think through about where they are at, where you once were. And you'll be better equipped to understand that, okay, you have all of this information around safety and efficacy and different modalities that they don't have.
Yeah.
Right? And now you'll be better able to educate, empower, communicate with them in a way that they are now growing in trust toward you. And as I mentioned, growing in their own empowerment so that they can make better purchase decisions for themselves.
Yeah, that's so good. They talk about this a lot in church, even about if you're anxious about something, just go do something for somebody else and get your mind off of it. So it's the same idea of meeting them with empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, and also just remembering all of the knowledge and skill set that you have, all the education that you have. You're there for a reason. And so with mindset, in mind, that's always a factor. But also, I think one thing that really can help is being equipped with the right kind of questions to ask, because you are there to serve, you're there to help. But sometimes, it's figuring out, how can I truly help this person? So let's say someone is brand new or in their first year of working with patients, and patients have complex needs. They have complex concerns and issues. What are some of the questions that you think that providers should be asking either during consults or on ongoing visits to just really make sure that they're not only meeting their patient with empathy, but also uncovering exactly how they can help that patient?
There are so many great questions that can and should be asked. I will tell you, in the course we're launching summer of 2024, Aesthetic Sales Hero, there are many practice questions, scripts, and scenarios that providers and staff alike can utilize. Having said that, I will tell you a core question that I like to ask and teach is essentially asking the patient, what would it mean for you if we were able to resolve that? And conversely, what would it mean for you if we didn't do anything about that, or if you were not going to do anything about that? And so whatever their concern or question or frustration they presented with, when you ask a question like that, it ties into deeper meaning for them, right? It's an emotional question. And it also has practical results where it may mean that they continue, if they don't get something done, let's say with you, it may mean that they continue to take less selfies because now they're more self-conscious about their look than how they were a few years ago, which may mean that now they spend less time engaging with their friends or going to events or holidays, which may mean, right, and so on and so forth. So connecting, it goes back to connecting with patients as individuals and going back to our role as humanity, right?
Yeah. Social Practice would love to offer your practice a free social media audit. Visit us on social media at Social Practice US. Click the link in our bio to claim your free audit today. All right, so before we wrap this up, I think we should play a little game.
All right.
So I want to present to you a case that I hear quite often in the work that we do, where we have a patient that comes in, a lot of times, let's say 40s, 50s, 60s, hasn't done a lot of aesthetic work, has seen it, heard about it through friends, but they come in and they're like, I think I just want a little Botox. And the provider's like, all right, great, sounds good. But, I don't like the lines here. I don't like the way my nose looks in this photo. The texture of my skin, but there's nothing you can do to fix the texture of my skin. I've tried everything. I've tried all the skincare products. I've done all the different, tools and techniques that I've read about in a magazine or on the shows that I watch. I just need Botox. But then, I'm complaining about all these other issues I have.
Yes.
What do you do with me?
So there is a whole section devoted to just these types of scenarios in our upcoming Aesthetic Sales Hero sales coaching platform. And let me give you a very tangible, practical 4-step way that you can address scenarios just like this. It's what I call exploration, validation, invitation, and information. Exploration, validation, invitation, and information. So step 1, exploration. Tell me more about this. You're frustrated about this. Tell me more. Or what's your experience been so far? How are you treating that? How's that working out for you? Right? The classic Dr. Phil.
Well, I do 20 units of Botox a year and I like it, but there's nothing we can do about the skin issues that I have. I've just tried everything.
Right. So then the next step is validation, which is as much as you are authentically able to empathize, do so. Oh my gosh, I can totally relate. Or I used to be there as well. I had very similar frustrations also. My experience was very similar, right? So you want to truly validate, connect, empathize with the prospect or the patient. The third step is really where it's the red bow that ties it all together, which is invitation. And this is so important because you are giving the reins and the power over to the patient. Namely, it's, would you like to know more? Would you like to know the truth? Would you like to know what my own experience has been? Would you like to know what my patients have discovered? Right? Would you like to know the science behind this? Right? You're giving them an invitation. And the reason why that's such a powerful thing is because you're giving them the power to say, no, I actually don't want to know.
So what you're saying is I've tried everything to treat my rosacea, my enlarged pores. My dermatologist, they're one of the best in town. They've done everything and nothing's helped me with these issues that I have. So you're saying that you have something that actually could fix the redness around my nose and around my eyes.
Correct.
And the size of my pores on my face.
That's exactly right. And so I would validate where you're coming from. Maybe I've experienced that myself, or I can tell you about patients that have as well. And hopefully at this point, I'm casting onto the monitor, my TouchMD iPad content showing the different, let's say, laser facial procedures that we're offering here. Microneedling, clinical grade skincare, showing you the results that our patients have discovered, right? Once I've gotten that buy-in from you of, would you like to know more? Would you like to know how we can actually treat and resolve that? So when you give me that first yes, now we're in a conversation, right? If you're going to say no, I really don't know. I really don't want to know, right? Then I'm going to respect that. Now I will tell you, 99 out of 100 conversations, they're not going to say no. They're going to say yes, of course. That's why I'm here. Right. Yeah. And then now you're living into that fourth pillar, which is the information. Let me give you the information so that you can make the best, most empowered decision for yourself, whether it's you needed to know more about the efficacy, you needed to see more of the social proof around before and afters or testimonials, or maybe you just needed to know that we have financing options and we can make this very accessible to you in terms of very low monthly payments.
I'm here today just for Botox, but I like this information, so I'll take that with me and I'll think about it. So what do you do at that point as a provider whenever you present the information, they're still a little bit too shy to take the next step forward? Should they be following up with that patient?
You should be following up with every prospect and patient on a regular basis. And I highly recommend using a CRM, a client relationship management platform like HubSpot, or a lot of the EMRs have these features built in as well, where you are continuing to keep that prospect or patient engaged. And also then giving yourself the breathing room and flexibility to let them genuinely think about something, right? Sometimes you'll be able to judge whether you need to say, look, my earnest recommendation is that you do this today because I just know you're absolutely going to love the results, and be more, let's say, forceful in your conviction, or whether the context does make more sense for them to think about it and get back to you. There's no harm, no foul there.
I love that idea around following up. How many times is it appropriate to follow up with somebody who's kind of on the fence? And what do those touch points look like?
There's not a set formula. However, I do think it's appropriate to have decide for yourself in your practice what works best. You should test it out. But certainly I think within a 2-week period, you should have multiple touch points and across different channels. So it could look like a DM, a text, an email. Maybe it's a video text that you send with them. Maybe it's some more information, before and afters, testimonials and whatnot, to keep them as engaged as possible. But sooner or later, you're going to want to be able to clear your pipeline, as it were. You don't want to have this huge prospective pipeline of 3,000 potential patients that are just never getting back to you.
Yeah. Do you feel like social media has a role in this follow-up process and this patient conversion process? And if so, how can that support our providers in a way to help them convert more of their patients to signing up for these procedures that they know they need, but they need some more time to really think on it?
Yeah, I don't see how you can succeed in this space as a new or growing practice without capitalizing on social media. Social media has replaced all of the traditional forms of marketing and advertising that I grew up with. I cannot even imagine where my business would be, or even having a business, if it weren't for my own social media platform and presence, which Social Practice manages and curates so well. So yeah, I think there's an essential role social media plays in terms of driving patient awareness, engagement, and conversion.
I agree. And I think with that follow-up process, some ideas that I had, and you can tell me if you think this is Marco approved or not as part of your process. But, with the patients that come in that are unsure, and, we are, pitching to them essentially sometimes $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 laser procedures. And for them, it might be brand new and they don't really understand the impact it's going to make on their lives. So how do we build that credibility, tell that story while they're in that period of thinking about it and doing their research? We can DM them client testimonial videos. Maybe we have a patient that's just like them, who came in with the rosacea, with the enlarged pores, and now the laser device that they use, they came to see Dr. Smith for, 3 or 4 times. Their entire their skin on their face is completely changed. And now they can go into their life and be confident and not be worried every day when they're in meetings or when they're picking up their kids and saying hi to their friends at the school that people are going to notice the redness on their skin or their enlarged pores. Having a case study like that, a video, or maybe it's before and afters as a carousel post on your Instagram that you can DM or repost to your stories and send to the patients that you have. Or just invite them. A lot of people engage on social media every single day, sometimes texting. You can reach out to a patient through text, but maybe also you're thinking of them. So it's simply just as simple as you're building a relationship with them through social. So you're maybe sending them reels that you found that you think they might like, or you are DMing them, checking in on them through social. People like that personalized touch because they feel more connected to you. And I think it's a great relationship builder. So have you found that those types of things help some of the providers you work with convert their patients?
Yes, everything you said is highly effective. And I would recommend every provider and practice instill that in their marketing and outreach. I'll tell you as well, one of the most effective messages that has helped me throughout my aesthetic journey and training and coaching sales reps, managers, as well as providers and practices is cycling through 3 core messages around safety, efficacy, and affordability.
Mm-hmm.
And what I distilled that down to back in 2011, and it has really been my secret weapon, one of my secret weapons, is communicating safety, provenness, right? It's safe. Everything we offer in the practice is safe, proven, and affordable, which is an acronym that spells SPA. So when you cycle your messaging through that, how are we communicating safety today or this week? How are we communicating that it's proven, that it's efficacious, that it's FDA approved or cleared? How are we showing that with social proof through before and afters, testimonials? And then how are we showing that it's affordable? Not cheap, right? But accessible and of high value. You can keep cycling through those messages, right? And now you're keeping your prospects engaged and educated.
That was so good, Marco. You are on fire. I am so excited for this year and this new sales course that you're launching. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so many tangible tips with our audience. Can you please tell us when we can sign up for this course that you're launching this year?
Yeah, so Aesthetic Sales Hero will be launching this summer 2024. I'll be doing a whole social media blitz with Social Practice as my agency of choice. And we're super excited about it. We're pricing it to be accessible to everyone and anyone who values social responsibility in their practice and leading with higher purpose to lead meaningful change in patients' lives and to leave a lasting legacy. So we're just absolutely excited about it.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Marco. We appreciate you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. You can find us on social media at the Aesthetic Edit Podcast.
We're on all podcast platforms, so don't forget to subscribe, and we'd love to hear from you.
And follow Social Practice on social media. You can find us at Social Practice US.
If you'd like to become a guest on the podcast, visit our webpage at social-practicetx.com/the-aesthetic-edit.